cold changes the way sound moves. It sharpens things, makes a dog's bark feel closer, a creak feel heavier, a breath feel like it's right on your neck. I used to love that hush after Christmas, when the town empties and the streets glow with leftover lights. Then one January night, I realized silence can follow you like a person. I worked the closing shift at a bookstore 2 blocks from the river. It was the last week of the holiday sale. Tinsel still clung to the window like tired confetti. The temperature had dropped to where the air burned your teeth. I wrapped my scarf high and counted my steps home. Right turn at the pharmacy. Left at the lamppost with the crooked wreath. 2 more blocks, and heat. But that night the snow talked back, one crunch for mine and one that wasn't. I told myself it was an echo. I told myself a lot of things until I couldn't. The first time I heard it, I'd barely left the bookstore. I locked up, tugged the door twice, and breathed fog into my scarf. The street was empty. The lights over Jackson Avenue flickered red-gold-red, making the snow look bruised. Crunch, my boots sank into powder. Crunch, behind me, half a second off. I stopped. The sound stopped. I turned, expecting a late commuter, a dog walker, anyone who'd wave and make the spell break. The sidewalk stretched clean to the corner. The nearest yard was a smooth, untouched sheet. Even the street looked unbothered, a white ribbon under a weak moon. Echo, I said into my scarf, because naming a thing helps until it doesn't. I walked again. 3 steps, crunch, 3 steps, crunch. At the second block, the feeling changed. Not just followed, watched. I looked across to the park and saw a shape under the far lamppost. Tall. Coat long enough to brush the tops of boots I couldn't see. Where the face should have been was a pale oval. Not glowing, not lit, just wrong against the night. I stared too long. The shape tilted its head, a slow angle like a curious bird. In reversed a step, backward, deliberate, until it slipped behind the angle of the post and was gone. My heart threw itself against my ribs in a dumb, heavy way that felt like a big animal trapped in a small cage. I shoved my hands deeper into my pockets, kept my eyes forward, and counted the steps to the crooked wreath. Right, left, right. Key. Lock. Heat. Don't think. Inside, the radiators clicked like old bones. I pressed my forehead to the window and watched my own breath fog the glass. Snow fell harder, grains like salt. No footprints marked the walk I'd taken. Not across the street, not near the lamppost. Mine, yes, deep and obvious. Nothing beside them. I slept with the lamp on and the TV low, letting some sitcom laugh track tell me the world was fine. The next morning, I told myself it had been a shadow, a trick of light, fatigue. By nightfall, I knew I'd been lying. I took the same route home because I am the kind of person who proves things. The same lights, the same hush. I timed my steps to the crosswalk countdown as if the numbers could protect me. At the pharmacy, crunch. In the second crunch. At the lamppost with the wreath. A prickle between my shoulder blades, like cold fingers combing the air. I didn't look back. I looked down. Snow holds stories like paper holds ink. Mine were there, heel toe, neat and deep. Beside them, nothing. Smooth as a pond that hasn't known a stone. I ran the last half block, let myself in with shaking hands and laughed. It was the kind of laugh you make when you've won a prize you didn't want. At 2:11 a.m., a new sound woke me. Not the heating pipes, not the fridge. A slow circling crunch, outside, around the house. Once by the front steps, once by the side window, once near the back door, that pause long enough for me to picture a face leaning to peer through the glass. I didn't lift the blind. I put my phone in my fist, the way people hold talismans, and waited with the lamp on. When dawn finally pushed a pale smear across the sky, I did the dumb brave thing and stepped onto the porch to check. My breath made little white ghosts. The steps were my boot prints from earlier. The yard was a clean book no one had written in. Nothing circled the house in neat rings. No trail led to the back door. The snow said no one had moved at all. On the railing lay a scarf I didn't own. Dark wool, old-fashioned, and wet from frost, as if someone had just set it down. A scrap of paper was tied into the fringe with a thin, red thread. 3 words in blocky letters, cold yet? I took it inside with 2 fingers and dropped it into the sink as if it could burn. Escalation 5 Su 9 zeros. Mia from the morning shift listened with her chin in her palm while we counted cash at the register. Stalker? She offered. Some creep with those giant quiet snowshoes you see in documentaries? No prints, I said. I checked. Ghost, she said, more serious now, like ghost meant a practical plan. Or sleep deprivation, both fixable with carbs. She invited me to stay at her place. I said I would, then went home anyway because stubbornness is a trait that dresses as independence when you're not careful. The third night, the sound came earlier, halfway between the bookstore and my block. Crunch. My pace changed. So did it. When I slowed, it slowed. When I paused under the pharmacy awning to tie my boot, a pause answered in the dark. I pretended to check my phone and took a photo over my shoulder. The screen showed only night, the weak cone of a streetlight, more snow falling like a static channel. When I turned the last corner, I risked a proper look back. Under the lamppost stood the figure again. Distance made it easy to lie to myself, a person in a dark coat. A hood, a scarf masking the face, but no breath puffed into the air. No drift of snow caught on the shoulders. The coat didn't move with the wind. I forced myself forward, dug my keys from my pocket, and did the whole ritual of lock, twist, shoulder, door, as if the sequence could keep the world behaving. I made tea I didn't drink. I stacked 3 chairs under the doorknob like a cartoon. I texted Mia. If I don't reply in the morning, call me twice. At 1:03 a.m., the crunch circled once. At 1:05, something pressed faintly against the front window glass. A tap too soft to be knuckles. At 1:07, a second tap, closer to the top pane, like someone taller than any of my friends had leaned in to measure me through the curtains. I did not lift the blind. I'm not a movie idiot. I stood in my hallway, phone in my fist, then walked, because it felt worse not to, toward the back door. Halfway there, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. My thumb slid, a photo filled the screen. Grainy, blue-toned, taken at night. My living room window from the outside. Me in the reflection. Just a shape clutching a phone, lamp on behind me. In the corner of the frame, a pale oval. My face? No, wrong angle. The oval was where the photographer should have been. But there was no person, no arm, no lens in the glass. I dropped the phone. The sound it made against the rug was too soft for how loud my heart was. I called the police. The dispatcher asked if anyone was inside. Outside, I said. I think. 2 officers came 10 minutes later, shoulders hunched against the cold, voices low with that mix of authority and apology. They checked the yard with flashlights. They looked for tracks. Nothing, one said, beams sweeping across clean snow. Fresh fall covers a lot. I just heard it, I said. It was here. The older one glanced at the scarf in the sink, but didn't ask. Keep your doors locked. If you see anyone specific, call again. He gave me a card with his name until the snow wet the ink and made the letters blur. When they drove away, their taillights turned the snow a temporary red. I watched that red drain and wished it would stain. The 4th night was New Year's Eve. The bookstore closed early. We wished each other warmth and promised to sleep through midnight. I stood at the front door longer than I should have, hand on the deadbolt, listening. The town had that strange holiday quiet, like everyone had taken their noise indoors. The river cracked in its ice, as if turning over in sleep. On my way home, I took the long route, down Maple, up 3rd, across to Oak, any path that avoided the lamppost. The air stung the inside of my nose. The stars felt too close, like holes poked in the ceiling. I walked on the road to avoid the temptation of looking at my own footprints. Crunch, I ignored it. Crunch, closer. The sound lived a half step behind, elastic, attached to me by a string. I cut left down an alley with a mural of summer flowers painted on the brick. The flowers looked embarrassed under their fur of frost. Wind shoved the snow into small, skittering ghosts across the asphalt. The alley spat me into a side street with a single lamp. Under it, the shape waited, same coat, same calm tilt of the head, same lack of breath. The pale oval of a face looked smoother tonight, as if features had been erased instead of never drawn. I wanted to scream, but my throat furloughed the job. I took one step back. The figure didn't follow. It lifted an arm and pointed behind me. I turned because sometimes fear is obedient. In the lamplight, the snow was perfect, soft as flour. A line of footprints led across it in a straight path to where I stood, big, clear, heel toe, heel toe. Not mine. Too long, the wrong tread. They ended at my boots as if whatever made them had walked into me and disappeared. The world swung gently, like the second before you faint. I ran without deciding to, past the lamp, past the alley flowers, past the pharmacy. The snow tried to grab my ankles with each step. The cold made knives of my breath. In the corner, the wreath looked wrong, bent, as if a heavy hand had leaned there to watch me pass. I didn't look back until I was inside, and by then the only thing in the window was my own shaking. Double-lit reflection, my power cut at 11:52 p.m. The whole block went soft and dark. In the sudden quiet, my house felt like a held breath. Wind pressed the walls in a long, patient way, as if testing them for weak places. I fumbled candles to life. Each flame bent sideways like it wanted to leave. My phone, at 9%, showed the time and a new message. Happy New Year, no number. The text hung there like a small flag. I put on boots inside, because rituals keep you alive. I dragged the bookcase in front of the back door. I pushed the sofa to brace the front. I stood in the hallway with a stupid weapon, umbrella of all things, and told myself I'd wait for dawn. Crunch, it circled once. Crunch, it stopped at the front step. I heard nothing knock. I felt it though, the look-through door feeling, the hold-your-breath feeling. The candle nearest the window guttered. My phone buzzed again. Another photo. My porch, from the street. The door dark, the window warm with candlelight. A pale oval at the glass. Me? No, the angle was wrong again. The oval was on the outside, close, as if pressing to see. I don't know why I opened the door. Maybe to prove it couldn't. The lock clicked under my hand, a small traitor sound. The door swung an inch, and the cold rushed in like a crowd. I shoved it closed with my shoulder, heart bucking, and slammed the bolt. "Stop!" I said out loud to the wood. "Please." The word made a small cloud in the cold seep. The cloud didn't vanish. It slicked sideways, as if brushed by a hand. Something leaned on the door from the outside. "Not hard, just present." I leaned back because you learn who you are in those moments, and I am too stubborn. The pressure matched mine. A weight, a person, a thing, then it withdrew. A slow peel, like tape coming off a surface without tearing it. The crunch moved away, not on the steps, but somehow around them. Across the yard, the sound became softer. At the sidewalk, it paused. My phone buzzed one more time. The last photo was of me, mouth set, shoulders hunched, taken through the crack where the door hadn't quite sealed before I bolted it. The timestamp read 11:59 p.m., New Year's Eve. When midnight came, the power returned with a tired hum. Far away, fireworks puffed sound like sleeping dogs. I stood at the window and watched the snow take back everything. In the morning, Mia banged on my door and swore at me for not answering sooner. We walked the yard together. My footprints from the night before made dumb human sense. The rest was a blank page again. We followed the sidewalk to the lamppost for form's sake. Nothing, no impressions under the light. No mark where the figure had waited. I kept the scarf. I don't know why. It dried on the radiator without smelling like anyone's detergent. When I touched it, it felt colder than it should, as if it remembered the night better than I did. I didn't report the photos, because the last time I'd tried to explain, I felt myself become a story even I wouldn't believe. I changed my route home, changed my shift, changed the way I looked at winter. Some nights, when the air is knife clear and the neighborhood falls quiet in that way only January can manage, I hear it again. The companion crunch that arrives exactly a half beat after mine. I don't look back. I walk in the road where the snow is thinnest. I keep my keys between my fingers and my breath inside my scarf. If you hear it too, if the snow starts answering your steps with its own, don't trust what your eyes do or don't see. Snow is a liar and a witness both. Don't follow prints that aren't yours. Don't keep souvenirs left on your porch like gifts. And if you get a message at midnight with a photo of yourself from outside your own door, don't open it until morning. Cold makes sound carry farther. Some things don't need the help. Winter cabins look cozy in pictures. Fireplaces glowing, snow falling soft outside. families sipping cocoa while the world stays locked out. That's what we thought we were getting when we rented a cabin for Christmas. 4 of us, away from the city noise, trading presents under pine beams while the storm howled outside. But the cabin had been waiting for us, and in the middle of that frozen night, we realized not everything scratching at the door wanted to come in for warmth. It was supposed to be perfect. We booked the cabin online. Rustic charm. Modern amenities. It sat on the edge of a frozen lake, 2 hours from town. The drive out was a postcard. Snow-dusted trees, red barns, holiday lights blinking faint in the storm. By the time we arrived, snow fell in sheets. The porch sagged under its weight. The front steps creaked when we carried in our bags. Inside, the air was stale but warm enough once we got the fire going. We set up stockings, opened wine, laughed too loud because we were alone and the world was white silence. But little things were wrong. The windows whined against the wind like something pushing back. The upstairs hallway smelled faintly of wet fur. And that first night, just as we were settling into sleep, I heard it, scratching. Slow, deliberate, like claws dragging across wood. Raccoons, Jacob muttered when I woke him. He rolled over. I listened until my eyes burned. In the morning, we found tracks outside the cabin. Not raccoon. Bigger. Bare footprints pressed deep into the snow, circling the cabin once, stopping at the back door. No trail leading away. We tried to laugh it off. Some drunk local, Mia said. Or a prank, but that night the power flickered. Shadows stretched long across the cabin walls. The fire cracked too sharply, sparks spitting like teeth. Then the scratching returned, louder, moving from one window to the next. Do you hear that? I whispered. All 3 of them nodded this time. Jacob grabbed the flashlight and threw open the curtains. Snow blinded us in a sheet of white. When the beam cut through it, we saw nothing. Just glass reflecting 4 pale, nervous faces. But the footprints were there in the morning again, fresh, deeper, circling tighter, stopping this time at the children's bedroom window, even though none of us had kids. The 3rd night was worse. The cabin groaned like something breathing. The scratching came again, but this time from the roof. We froze, listening to heavy steps moving above us, snow falling in clumps as weight shifted. Then tapping. 3 knocks against the chimney, Mia whispered. Santa? Like a bad joke, but no one laughed. At 2 a.m., the scratching stopped. The silence was so sudden it hurt. We didn't move until dawn. When we finally opened the cellar door, thinking to stoke the backup furnace, we found it open. Snow had drifted in, and down there, faint outlines of objects sat beneath the frost. An old rocking horse, a broken crib, tiny shoes lined neatly against the wall. The cellar smelled of wet earth and rot, and in the far corner, a single handprint smeared against the wall, child-sized, frozen into the stone. The storm peaked on Christmas Eve. We huddled in the living room, every candle lit, fire stacked high. The walls shook with wind, snow rattled like fists against the glass. At midnight, the scratching began again. Every window, every door, a full circle of claws raking wood, faster, harder, like something desperate to be let in. Then the knocking started. Not one door, all of them. At once, Jacob shouted and ran to the cellar door. It was wide open. Snow blew up the stairs like breath. We crowded behind him, and that's when we saw them, shapes in the storm, small hunched figures moving on all 4s, circling the cabin. Their eyes glowed faint in the firelight, dozens. One stood at the threshold of the cellar, its body small, wrong, skin grey-blue with frost. It tilted its head like it had been waiting years to be invited back inside. The scratching turned to pounding. The glass bowed inward. We slammed the cellar door and pushed the table against it. Every chair, every box as the sound rose into a chorus of claws and fists. And then, just as suddenly, silence. We waited hours, holding the barricade until dawn. When light came, the cabin was still. Outside, the snow was smooth. No prints, no marks. No sign of what had circled us all night. We left the cabin that morning without packing. We drove through the storm like hunted animals, not looking back until the road bent and hid the roof from view. Later, when I told locals at a diner what we'd seen, one old man just shook his head. Shouldn't have gone up there in winter, he said. Cabin's been hungry since the Brannans vanished in '78. Whole family, gone before New Year's. Folks say the storm takes their shapes, scratches to be let back in. We never spoke of it again. But every Christmas, when the air is sharp and the snow piles high against the windows, I wake at midnight and listen, because sometimes I swear I hear it, faint scratching, just beyond the glass. And I wonder how long a cabin can stay hungry before it finds another way inside. Snow makes prayers quieter. It eats sound, softens footsteps, turns whole towns into chapels. That's why Father Allen loved midnight mass. The world is the sanctuary, he'd tell me, smiling at his own poetry. I volunteered to help every Christmas Eve, light the pew candles, set out programs, lock up when the last parishioner drifted home through the snow. Last year, he asked me to close the church alone. "I'll check on Mrs. Ruiz after the service," he said, pulling on his coat. "Her furnace keeps dying." He pressed the ring of keys into my glove. 15 minutes, tops. 15 minutes became a night I still can't explain, because the church wasn't empty when I locked the doors. Midnight mass had been packed. Families blinking sleep. Toddlers humming at the wrong moments. Old men coughing into scarves. I stood in the back with a basket of programs and watched candles climb like a tide, pew by pew, until the nave glowed. We sang Silent Night so softly, even the stained glass seemed to listen. When the last blessing faded, Father Allen squeezed my shoulder and slipped out into the snowfall, scarf flapping like a benediction. People lingered in the aisles, hugging, whispering, promising to meet in the morning for coffee and leftovers. I waved them out, one by one, until only the echo of their voices remained. The church felt bigger once it was empty. The choir loft disappeared into shadow. The high ceiling sighed with old wood and December. Outside, snow fell with the sound of sifted flour. I blew out the Advent wreath, 4 purple candles, 1 pink, and walked the center aisle, pinching wicks between wet fingers, watching each tiny curl of smoke lift and vanish. When I reached the vestibule, a draft slid under the door like a cat. I peered through the narrow pane of glass. The front steps wore a fresh sheet of snow. My own footprints made a neat trail to the sidewalk. Beyond that, the street was untouched, as if the town had agreed to pause and let the night be perfect. I checked the sacristy, locked the side door, took a last look toward the loft. A rectangle of the organ's pipes moved with the air, then stilled. 15 minutes, I reminded myself, pocketing the keys. The stone carried cold up through my boots like a gentle threat. I was halfway to the front when the bell rang, not the electric chime, the big bell in the tower. It tolled once, low and patient, a sound that goes through your coat and finds your ribs. The bell rope was tied. I tied it myself, looped twice around the cleat in the tower closet. I stood there, listening for a second strike. Nothing. My breath fogged and drifted. Then, somewhere behind me, a candle hissed back to life. I turned. In the third pew from the front, a small flame stood upright. Steady, as if someone had just cupped it from wind. I frowned, walked back down the aisle and pinched it dark. My fingers smelled like wax and old smoke. I glanced over the pew backs out of habit, like a teacher checking for stragglers. Between pews 10 and 11, a program lay open on the floor, the page rippling with a draft I couldn't feel. I stooped to pick it up. Chim 214, O come, all ye faithful. I placed it on the seat. It slid an inch by itself and stopped. Air currents, I told the church, and the church didn't argue. At the vestibule again, I looked out once more. A single set of footprints led from the sidewalk to the front steps, mine. But now there was a second path. Faint depressions in the snow, moving toward the doors from the street. They stopped at the top step. No prints led away. I unlocked the door and tugged it open an inch. The night pressed its cold mouth to the gap. Snow lay undisturbed, perfectly smooth except for those faint ovals. I stuck a hand out and felt nothing but flakes. When I closed the door, the faint bell taste of metal lingered on my tongue. My phone buzzed. A text from Father Allen. Furnace fixed! You good there? I typed, all good. Locking now. Then I turned the deadbolt, slid the chain, and because I am a person who likes proof, pressed my palm to the wood. Solid. The organ spoke, not a chord. One note, soft as a breath, like a child humming from under a blanket. I stared up at the loft. Shadows made a sort of curtain across the railing. No one moved behind it. The note stopped. The silence felt like someone waiting for me to reply. I climbed the side stairs, my steps loud. At the top, the organ sat quietly, ranks of pipes like patient teeth. The bench was empty. A scarf was folded on the rail, a red one, damp with melted snow. I touched it and my fingers burned cold. On the music stand, O Come, Emmanuel lay open. A circle of moisture bloomed in one corner, as if someone had rested a wet thumb there while turning the page. "I'm locking up," I said to no one, pressing the book closed. "Merry Christmas." Something in the dark breathed like it was trying out the word Christmas for the first time. I came down faster than I went up. The church changed when I reached the floor. It felt fuller, not crowded exactly, but attentive, as if pews notice things when people leave. The stained glass moon in St. Cecilia's window looked brighter, pale light settling on the aisle in soft squares. I started the lock-up ritual over, to prove to myself it was just a ritual. Check the sacristy latch, secure the side door, extinguish any candle foolish enough to think it could relight itself when my back was turned. When I reached the first pew again, a whisper floated from the nave. Not words, notes. Someone was singing Silent Night the way a person sings to themselves while folding laundry, quiet and absent-minded. The tune was right, but the timing felt wrong, stretched in places like old elastic. "Hello?" My voice made a poor echo. "Service is over." The whispering stopped, as if surprised to be heard. I tried the front doors again. The deadbolt turned, chain slid. I opened to the night. New snow had fallen. My prints blurred into softness. The faint ovals that had led to the top step were gone underneath a fresh dusting, as if whoever had pressed them had lifted back out of the world. I shut the door, turned, and nearly stepped on wet footprints. Not snowy, wet, bare. They appeared on the stone, starting 2 pews back from the front, 10 toes visible, arch and heel like someone had just stood there, barefoot, melting snow onto the aisle. The prints moved toward the altar, then sideways across to the center aisle, then stopped where the carpet began. Beyond that, no marks at all. I followed them because that's the curse of rational people. We collect evidence even when we are evidence. The stone was cold enough to sizzle moisture into steam. The prints faded as I watched. Then the organ played again, a different hymn this time, once in Royal David's City. A single phrase, halting, like a hand learning the keys. I didn't go back up. "Okay," I said to the empty pews, the way you talk to a skittish dog. "We're closed. You can—" I stopped before I said, "Come back tomorrow." A shape moved in the side aisle. My breath hiccuped. For a second, I thought it was a trick of the candles, wax bending light. Then it stepped into a patch of window glow, and I saw it was a woman in a coat, 1 decade out of date. Hair loose around her shoulders, eyes glassy with the kind of tiredness grief makes. She walked between pews with the automatic grace people have when they've walked the same path for years. She didn't look at me. She slid into the 3rd pew and knelt, hands folded, head bowed. "Ma'am," I said. Others followed. A man with a hat crushed in his hands. 2 children in matching pajamas undercoats, a teenager in a cheer jacket with a run in her stocking, an old lady muttering a rosary in a language I didn't know. They came in from nowhere, forming from the dark like breath on glass, each taking their pew, the one they had held in years when the church had been fuller, when Christmas was something you dressed for. None of them tracked snow. None of them made sound. The only noise was the soft fricative of fabric and the air moving when they sat. I stood frozen, halfway down the aisle. I recognized some faces from photos in the parish hall, the memorial bulletin board, Father Allen updates before funerals. Others I knew in the slippery way you know townspeople without names. When the last of them arrived, the organ spoke once more. A boy climbed onto the bench. Not climbed exactly, but took his place there in a way that made the bench seem suddenly right to hold him. His hands hovered above the keys and found Silent Night with the gentle certainty of a memory the body keeps when the brain forgets. They sang, not loudly. Not like the packed church an hour earlier. They sang like people sing when they don't want to wake a house. The harmony found itself on the 2nd verse, thin at first, then stronger, as if each voice remembered that it used to be brave. When they reached "Sleep in Heavenly Peace," a woman in the back turned her head and looked directly at me. Her mouth kept moving, but the song dropped under her gaze. Her eyes were dark in a way I have no words for. Not empty, not full. Like a night sky with no stars. Just the idea of how far it goes. "Stay," she said. And though her lips were forming the hymn, I felt the word in my ear as if she were close enough to fog my cheek. Stay for the last verse. My hands had gone stupid with cold. My phone was warm in my pocket like a secret. I took one careful step backward. The congregation didn't turn to follow me. They went on singing, eyes on the altar, faces soft with an old story told again and again until it feels like home. The bell tolled a second time. This one I felt in my teeth. The front doors shuddered on their hinges, not from wind. The deadbolt slid by itself with a dry little sigh. The chain lifted like a polite letter opener, and the doors eased open just enough for new snow to skate across the stone. Outside, the street was still emptier than it had any right to be on Christmas Eve. I should have run. I know that, but the song held me the way a hand on the back of your neck can hold you, gentle and complete. Come, the woman's not voice said. It's warmer when we're many. I took another step back, then another, moving in the slow-motion way of nightmares where time has thickened and your legs have to swim through it. The lights went out. Not a pop. More like a decision. Candle flames slimmed to threads and vanished. The red exit sign became a smudge. The organ stopped in the middle of heavenly. In the dark, the congregation didn't gasp. They drew breath together, one body. Then dozens of hands touched the backs of the pews at once. A soft drum of skin on wood, and every head turned toward where I had been standing when the lights died. They could see me in the dark. I knew it as a fact, like knowing your own name. Stay, 100 not voices breathed. Stay for eternity. I fumbled my phone out. It lit the aisle in a blue smear that felt less like light than like permission to be afraid. Figures crowded the pew ends now, closer than they'd been, hands pale against the wood, knuckles raised as if about to knock. Their faces had unfastened a little, features softening, edges wrong. The woman in the third pew stood. The children in pajamas slipped into the aisle with a dreamwalker's certainty. The boy at the organ bench was no longer a boy. The keys depressed by themselves, moving like a chest breathing. I ran. Not a sprint, my feet stuck to the stone with cold and old fear, but I moved, and movement is sometimes the whole miracle. The front doors yawned wider at my approach, not to open for me, but to inhale. Air poured in so cold it made my eyes ache. Snow angled inside like white moths. The deadbolt lay flat, useless, the chain hanging free. I made it 3 pews from the front when hands, no weight, only temperature, closed around my wrists. It felt like pressing my arms into a snowbank and holding them there until the skin went to glass. I yanked, sloshing blue light across faces that didn't muscle to hold me. They only were around me, and the being was enough. Please, I said aloud, though I don't know to whom. I need to go home. You are home, the breath voices said. Behind me, the doors edged another inch. The night wheeled on the threshold, patient as a predator with nowhere else to be. Past the doors, the steps were empty. The street was white. No footprints. Snow made a clean slate for a story that didn't want me to write it. I dropped the phone on purpose. The light folded, cursed me by going face down. In the dark, the hands lost me for a fraction of a second. I bolted sideways into a pew, over it, scraped my thigh on a hymnal rack, took the center aisle at a diagonal, and slammed into the vestibule with more noise than I'd made all night. The doors tried to close. I swear to you they tried to close toward me. Wood moving without hinges, the gap shrinking as if the church inhaled again, and the night was its lungs. I shoved with shoulder and hip and ungrace. The cold rewarded me with a sting like waking after a long, wrong sleep. Snow slapped my cheeks. My boots found the first step and slid and found it again. The knot voices didn't follow me outside. They filled the doorway, a pressure I could feel in my teeth, then stopped like the threshold was a line they couldn't draw over me. When I hit the sidewalk, I turned. Through the slot of open door, the nave was a darkness with a temperature. For a split second, 100 pale faces regarded me out of it, not cruel, not kind, merely available. Then the doors shut gently, with a click soft enough to be a courtesy, I don't remember walking home. I remember the quiet like milk in my ears, and the way my hands ached when heat finally found them. In the morning, I woke in my coat on the sofa, keys still in my pocket, phone face down on the floor. Battery dead like a small animal. Outside, snow had polished the world to blank. I went back to the church at 9, stupid, with lack of sleep and hungry for proof. Father Allen met me on the steps, cheeks pinked with cold, breath white. "You left in a hurry," he said kindly, like I'd forgotten a scarf. He held up the ring of keys I'd dropped in the vestibule. "Everything all right?" Inside, the nave looked smaller. Sun made squares on the aisle where moonlight had been. Pews were pews. The organ sat still as furniture, bench empty. "O come, all ye faithful," back on the stand as if it had always been there. The red scarf hung on the loft rail, dry now, ordinary. I touched it, and it felt like yarn, not like weather. I checked the tower closet. The bell rope had 2 loops around the cleat, neat as a promise. We found footprints at the front, mine, smudged and thawed. No others, not wet prints on stone. Not bare toes. Father Allen said something about drafts and old buildings, and how stone remembers winter in a way wood doesn't. When parishioners trickled in for morning service, Mrs. Ruiz lit a candle for her husband and said, in an offhand way that wasn't offhand at all, "I always feel him close on Christmas." A teenager from the youth group said he'd dreamt of playing the organ last night, though he'd never had a lesson. The choir hummed Silent Night while pulling on robes. The tune too gentle for day, I didn't tell anyone. Now in January's iron cold, when snow refreezes into glass and my breath makes ghosts in the kitchen, the church bells carry farther. Sometimes I wake at 12:07 a.m., the exact minute the second bell sounded, and hear a chord you can only hear if you've been inside the dark where it lives. If I pass the church at night, I don't look through the door panes. I don't touch the wood. I don't hum along when Silent Night floats, out of the bricks like heat from a hearth, because I know the difference between an empty building and a place that's full of what it used to hold. And if you volunteer to lock up after midnight mass, do it quickly. Don't count the steps to the door. Don't follow wet footprints. Don't wait for the second bell. If the candles relight themselves, let them. If someone asks you to stay for the last verse, remember that some songs never end.